Sir, my mother has a tattoo just like yours. Aisha's voice cut through the stunned silence of Spago's private alcove like a blade, low but steady, every word landing heavier than the last. The entire table froze. Landon Pierce's hand stopped mid-air, the crystal tumbler tilting dangerously as his fingers went slack. His face, tanned, confident, untouchable seconds ago, drained of every drop of color, turning the shade of cold ash. The glass slipped. It hit the marble floor and exploded into 1,000 glittering shards, bourbon spraying across $1,000 Italian loafers. Head snapped around. Phones lifted. A producer at the next table gasped audibly. Landon didn't even flinch at the crash. He was staring at Aisha like she'd just pulled a pin from a grenade. His lips parted but nothing came out at first, just a ragged breath that sounded almost like pain. Then barely a whisper, cracked and broken. That's impossible. His sleeve was still rolled up, the jagged fault line cracking through the star on his forearm exposed for everyone to see, the exact same ink Aisha had traced on her mother's skin 1,000 times. Yvette's tattoo. January 17, 1994. The date the Earth split Los Angeles open. Aisha didn't move. Didn't blink. Just held his gaze, heart pounding so loud she was sure the whole restaurant could hear it. Because in that moment, with the city's most powerful man unraveling in front of her, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever secret that tattoo was hiding, it had just come back to life. Before we continue, I want to speak to you for a moment. If stories like this remind you that kindness still exists, if they make you feel something real in a world that's getting louder and colder, then I'd love to have you here with us. This channel isn't just videos, it's a tiny corner of the internet where good people come together. Where we believe in second chances, in hope, and in humanity. And right now you're early. You're part of the very first people building this family with me. So if you want to grow with us, if you want more stories that touch your heart, go ahead and subscribe. It's free, it supports the channel more than you know. And it tells me that there are still people out there who believe in kindness just as much as I do. If you have subscribed to this channel, I can officially say welcome to the family. The air in Spago that night was thick with ambition and truffle oil. Wolfgang Puck's legendary dining room hummed under vaulted ceilings as Hollywood producers, tech investors, and real estate titans leaned in over plates that cost more than most people's car payments. Out on the patio, fairy lights flickered against the Beverly Hills skyline, but inside the private alcove, the mood was all business, until it wasn't. Aisha Brooks balanced her silver tray like a shield, weaving through the crowd in her crisp white blouse and black slacks. 6 hours into her double shift, her feet screamed, but her smile stayed welded on. Tips from a table like this could cover half the rent on their Koreatown bungalow. She approached the corner booth where 3 men in bespoke suits held court, the kind of table everyone in the restaurant pretended not to stare at. Landon Pierce sat in the center, 55, silver at the temples, green eyes sharp enough to cut deals across a room. The man who'd retrofitted half of Los Angeles after the Northridge quake, whose towers now defined the skyline. He was mid-text when Aisha set down the last bourbon. As she turned to leave, his sleeve rode up just enough. The tattoo stopped her cold. A jagged fault line slicing through a 5-pointed star. January 17, 1994, the day the earth cracked open and changed everything. Her mother had the exact same one. Aisha's heart slammed against her ribs. She traced that ink on Yvette's arm 1,000 times growing up, always asking, always getting the same vague answer. From the big shake, baby. A reminder we survived. She didn't think. She just spoke. Sir, my mother has a tattoo just like yours. The words left her mouth quiet but clear, slicing straight through the low rumble of conversation. Everything stopped. Landon's head snapped up. His thumb froze on the phone screen. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like someone had flipped a switch, tan skin turning ghostly under the warm lights. The bourbon glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the marble with a spectacular crash, amber liquid and crystal shards exploding outward. A few drops splashed across the Italian leather loafers of the man beside him. Gasps rippled. Phones rose. Someone muttered, "Holy shit." Landon didn't notice any of it. He was staring at Aisha like she'd spoken in tongues. "That's impossible," he rasped, voice barely above a whisper. Aisha didn't back down. Fault line through a star. January 17, 1994. My mom's name is Yvette Brooks. She said it was from the quake, with someone she trusted. The name hit him like a second tremor. Landon's associate, Kurt, some development VP, tried to laugh it off. Come on, Landon, she's probably fishing. But Landon wasn't listening. His gaze dropped to his own exposed forearm, then back to Aisha, calculating, reeling. How old are you? He asked, voice cracking on the last word. 32. The math hung in the air like smoke. Kurt's smirk vanished. The third man at the table slowly lowered his phone. Landon stood so fast his chair scraped backward. Where is she? Aisha hesitated. This was insane. She'd come for tips, not to detonate a bomb. But her mother's voice echoed in her head. The late-night collection calls, the storage unit bills piling up, the exhaustion in Yvette's eyes after another day trying to keep their thrift shop afloat. She's at home, Aisha said finally. Koreatown. But I'm coming with you. He was already moving, pulling out his wallet, tossing bills at the stunned maitre d' without counting. Kurt called after him, Landon, wait, this could be a setup. But Landon didn't stop. Aisha followed, pulse racing as cameras tracked them all the way to the valet. 40 minutes later, the black town car pulled up outside the weathered bungalow off Vermont Avenue. The contrast was brutal, gleaming luxury against cracked stucco and buzzing streetlights. Aisha's keys shook in her hand as they climbed the steps. Landon stood behind her, silent, jaw tight. She opened the door. Yvette was in the kitchen, mid-laugh on the phone, stirring something that smelled like plantains and home. She turned and froze. The wooden spoon clattered to the linoleum. Landon? The name came out like a ghost leaving her mouth. He stepped inside, eyes locked on her like the world had narrowed to this one room. Yvette. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the distant wail of a siren and the low hum of the refrigerator. Then Yvette's face hardened. You have some nerve showing up here after 32 years. Aisha closed the door behind them, heart in her throat. Landon's voice was raw. They told me you were dead. Building collapse. I searched the rubble myself. You left me in that rubble? Yvette cut in, voice rising. She stepped forward, eyes blazing. You took the artifacts, every single Mayan piece we risked our lives pulling from that collapsed museum during the quake, and you ran with them. That's what seeded your entire empire, isn't it? While I was trapped under concrete, fighting to breathe. Landon swayed like he'd been punched. His mouth opened, closed. Aisha's breath caught. Artifacts? Her mother had never breathed a word. Yvette turned to her daughter, tears finally breaking through the fury. I never told you the whole story because I thought he was gone. But he's not just the man who abandoned me, Aisha. He's your father. The room spun. Landon's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of a chair to stay upright, face crumpling in shock. His voice came out broken. I looked for you. For months. The rescue reports, they said you were gone. My company, we got the insurance payout after they declared you dead. Yvette laughed, bitter and sharp. That's because your partners paid the rescuers to fake it, she said. They needed the money fast to flip those first properties. And you never questioned it, did you? Because believing I was dead was easier than admitting what you'd done. Landon sank into the chair, head in his hands. Outside, the city kept moving, headlights streaking down Vermont, helicopters chopping overhead. Inside, 32 years of buried secrets had just broken the surface. And the ground beneath all three of them was still shaking. The next morning felt like waking up inside someone else's life. Aisha sat at the chipped Formica kitchen table in the Koreatown bungalow, staring at the business card Landon had left on the counter before his driver took him away at dawn. Heavy cream stock, embossed gold lettering. Landon Pierce, Pierce Developments. She flipped it over, he'd scrawled a phone number in sharp, impatient strokes. Yvette hadn't slept. She stood at the sink, scrubbing the same pot over and over, her back rigid. We're not taking his money, she said without turning around. Not 1 cent. Aisha exhaled. Mom, the storage unit's 2 months behind. They're threatening to auction everything next week. Whatever's in there, it's our last card. Yvette's shoulders sagged. She set the pot down harder than necessary. Fine, she muttered. But we do this on our terms. By noon, Landon's black SUV pulled up outside. He climbed out alone. No driver, no assistant. Wearing jeans and a plain gray hoodie like he was trying to disappear into the neighborhood. He looked exhausted, eyes bloodshot behind sunglasses. They drove in silence to the drab storage facility off Washington Boulevard in Culver City. The manager, a bored guy with a clipboard, led them to Unit 217. The metal door rattled up with a grinding screech, revealing dusty plastic bins, rolled-up rugs, and a row of locked metal cases Yvette hadn't opened in decades. Landon paid the back fees on the spot. Cash, no questions. The manager walked away whistling. Inside the unit, the air was stale and thick with old earthquake dust. Yvette knelt by the largest case, fingers trembling as she worked the combination lock she hadn't touched since 1994. The lid creaked open. Gold glinted in the harsh fluorescent light. Mayan pendants, jade masks, obsidian blades, dozens of pieces, meticulously wrapped in faded newspaper. Aisha's breath caught. She'd expected junk, maybe some sentimental knickknacks. Not this. Landon went very still. Jesus, he whispered. You kept them. Yvette didn't look at him. You took what you thought was everything. I kept what was real. They loaded the cases into the SUV and drove straight to a discreet appraisal vault in Culver City that Landon knew. Neutral ground, armed security, no names required. The appraiser, an older woman named Dr. Vargas with gloves and a jeweler's loupe, worked in silence for over an hour. When she finally spoke, her voice was hushed. Conservative estimate, 8 to 12 million at private auction. Museum-grade provenance, if you ignore how they left the ground. Aisha felt dizzy. 8 to 12 million. Rent. College debt. The future. Yvette's face, though, remained stone. Landon wrote a check on the spot for the immediate debts, storage liens, credit cards, the thrift shop's overdue lease. Yvette didn't stop him this time. That night, he invited them to his Malibu villa, just to talk logistics, he said. Aisha convinced her mother to come. They needed answers as much as money. The house perched on a cliff over the Pacific, all glass and teak and ocean views that stretched forever. A private chef served brunch on the terrace. Fresh fruit, huevos rancheros, mimosas nobody touched. Conversation stayed careful at first. Auction houses, timelines, security. Then Aisha pulled out her phone and opened the photos she'd snapped in the storage unit. Close-ups of the artifacts, and one old Polaroid that had fallen out of a bin. It showed a younger Landon and Yvette, dust-streaked and grinning amid quake rubble, arms around each other, the fresh tattoos visible on both their forearms. Tell me the whole story, Aisha said quietly. No more half-truths. Landon stared at the photo for a long time. We were reckless, he began. Activists angry at how developers were already circling damaged neighborhoods before the dust settled. We heard rumors a small private museum in Northridge had collapsed. Priceless Mayan pieces inside, uninsured, about to be lost in the chaos. Yvette picked up the thread, voice flat. We broke in during an aftershock. Thought we were liberating them, keeping them from looters who'd sell to private collectors anyway. They'd planned to fence the pieces anonymously, use the money to help displaced families. But when the biggest aftershock hit, the building came down around them. Landon had grabbed what he could and run. Yvette had been trapped. He thought she died. She thought he'd chosen greed over her life. Silence stretched over the terrace, broken only by waves crashing far below. Then Dr. Vargas's earlier words resurfaced, something she'd muttered while examining a jade mask. These pieces carry stories, she'd said. Some collectors swear the provenance brings misfortune. Failed deals, accidents, bankruptcies. Landon rubbed his temples. I always thought it was paranoia. But after I sold my share, every major project hit unexplained delays. Partners bailed. Permits vanished. 2 towers I built in the early 2000s? Structural issues no engineer could explain. I lost hundreds of millions. Yvette's eyes narrowed. They're cursed, she said softly. Not superstition. Real history. The Maya believed disturbing certain burial goods brought ruin on thieves. I read the inscriptions before we took them. I warned you. Landon laughed hollow. And I didn't listen. Thought it was romantic nonsense. Aisha felt a chill despite the California sun. Then Yvette reached across the table and took the old Polaroid from Aisha's hand. She held it up to the light, studying the tattoo on her younger self's arm. Her fingers traced the fault line. Look closer, she said. Aisha leaned in. Under magnification on her phone screen, the ink wasn't just a design. Tiny, almost invisible numbers were etched along the crack, coordinates. GPS coordinates. Yvette met Landon's eyes, steady and cold. "I booby-trapped the haul," she said. "The pieces you ran with? Decoys. Good fakes I switched out while you were loading the truck. The real cash, the ones worth 10 times more, are still buried where the earth swallowed them that night." Landon's face went pale again. "You let me think I'd taken everything?" "I let you think you'd left me for dead with nothing," Yvette corrected. "Turns out I was the one who buried the fortune." Aisha stared at the ocean, mind reeling. 8 to 12 million was just the tip. And now shadowy debtors, who'd been circling Yvette for years, somehow knowing something valuable was hidden, began calling again. The phone in Yvette's purse buzzed insistently. Unknown number. When she answered, a distorted voice delivered a simple message. "We know you open the unit. Bring what's ours, or we come take it." The wind off the Pacific suddenly felt a lot colder. The real quake, it seemed, was only just beginning. The coordinates led them back to Northridge, ground zero of the nightmare. Aisha sat in the back of Landon's matte black Range Rover, watching familiar freeways blur past. The 405 north, then the 118, the same routes that had buckled and cracked 32 years ago. The San Fernando Valley sprawled below them in late afternoon gold, but every overpass they drove under felt like a reminder that the earth here had a memory. Landon drove himself this time. No driver, no security detail yet. Yvette rode shotgun, arms crossed tight, staring out the window like she was seeing ghosts in every strip mall and apartment complex that had risen from the rubble. They pulled off the freeway near the Cal State Northridge campus and followed a service road into a quiet industrial pocket that had never fully recovered. Chain-link fencing, overgrown weeds, a faded sign for a long bankrupt mini-mall. The GPS pinged. Destination reached. The spot was an empty lot wedged between a tire shop and a self-storage place. Nothing but dirt, cracked asphalt, and a lone jacaranda tree that had somehow survived decades of neglect. Landon killed the engine. "This is it?" Aisha asked. Yvette nodded slowly. "The museum annex used to be right here. Collapsed completely. They bulldozed the debris and paved over it for temporary parking. Never built anything permanent. Too much liability, I guess." They climbed out, boots crunching on gravel. Landon popped the tailgate and handed out collapsible shovels and a small ground-penetrating radar unit he'd borrowed from one of his engineering teams. The air smelled like hot dust and eucalyptus. For 2 hours they worked in tense silence, sweat soaking through their clothes, taking turns digging test holes under the jacaranda's purple canopy. Debtor calls kept lighting up Yvette's phone. Unknown numbers, distorted threats. She silenced each one. Then the radar beeped. 6 feet down, wrapped in heavy plastic and buried inside a rusted ammo box, they found it, another layer of Mayan treasure. Smaller than the storage unit hall, but exquisite, intricate gold ear spools, a mosaic death mask, jade beads that caught the fading sun like green fire. Aisha lifted the mask carefully, her photographer's eye catching how the light played across the turquoise inlay. Landon stared at the pieces like they might bite him. "We should get out of here," he said finally, "before someone sees us." They loaded the box and drove east toward Echo Park, to a hidden speakeasy Landon knew, an unmarked door behind a taco stand that led to a dimly lit basement with velvet booths and a single bartender who asked no questions. Over mezcal and carnitas the walls started coming down. Yvette talked first, about waking up in the hospital with no ID, temporary amnesia from the head injury, discovering she was pregnant only weeks later. Deciding to vanish rather than risk Landon's powerful family taking the child. Landon talked about the guilt that never left, how he'd poured himself into rebuilding LA as penance, but always on terms that favored profit over people. How every groundbreaking felt hollow. Aisha listened, turning the jade beads over in her fingers, feeling the weight of lives she'd never known. Then Landon set his glass down, eyes on Aisha. "There's something else I need to tell you." Yvette tensed. He pulled a worn leather wallet from his back pocket and slid out an old photograph, creased, edges soft from years of handling. Aisha at 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning in a school portrait. On the back, in faded ink, Aisha Brooks, goddaughter. Aisha's throat tightened. "After the quake," Landon said quietly, "I set up an anonymous trust through a victim assistance program. For orphans and displaced kids. I funneled money specifically to you. Private elementary school tuition. Art classes. The camera you got for your 12th birthday. All of it came from me. Yvette's eyes widened. You were the scholarship foundation that paid for her school? The one I told to stop sending checks when she was 14? Landon nodded. I respected your wishes. Stopped the direct payments. But I kept watching from a distance, making sure you were safe. Aisha stared at the photo, then at him. You were there the whole time? Not close enough to be a father, he said, voice rough. But close enough to be something. Your godfather on paper. I signed the documents the day you were born. Had a contact at the hospital forge Yvette's consent while she was still recovering. I thought if I couldn't be in your life, at least I could protect you. Yvette looked like she'd been slapped. Then something softer flickered across her face. Understanding, maybe even gratitude buried under decades of hurt. Aisha felt tears threaten. All those years wondering why some anonymous donor cared. The camera that changed everything for her. Outside the speakeasy, night had fallen. They stepped into the Echo Park air, the city lights glittering across the lake like scattered jade. Landon spoke again. I want to do this right. The artifacts, we repatriate them properly through museums in Mexico and Guatemala. The money from legitimate sales funds something real. Yvette met his eyes for the first time without pure anger. Community housing, she said. Affordable units on land your company already owns. No displacement. Real rent control. He nodded. And an alliance. The Yvette Brooks Alliance. You run it. I bankroll it. We fight gentrification together, the right way this time. Aisha smiled despite herself. A family, fractured and strange but starting to fit together. They scheduled the first public forum for Watts, announcing the alliance, the repatriation effort, the housing initiative. But as they drove south toward home, another call came through on Yvette's phone. Same distorted voice. You can dig up whatever you want. But the debt's still due. And we know exactly where you'll be next Saturday. The line went dead. The forum in Watts was now a target. And whatever shadows had been chasing them since the quake weren't ready to stay buried. Saturday arrived like a storm rolling in off the Pacific. Hot, heavy, and inevitable. The Watts Community Center buzzed with energy. Folding chairs filled the gymnasium, banners for the newly formed Yvette Brooks Alliance hung proudly. Repatriate. Rebuild. Resist gentrification. Local families, activists, artists, and even a few curious reporters packed the room. On stage, Yvette stood tall in a bright Ankara wrap, speaking passionately about returning the Mayan artifacts to their homelands and using sale proceeds to fund truly affordable housing. Aisha snapped photos from the side, her professional camera clicking steadily, capturing hope, determination, the faces of people who looked like her childhood neighbors. Landon sat in the front row, uncharacteristically understated in a plain button-down, watching Yvette with something close to awe. The plan was simple. Announce the repatriation partnership with museums in Guatemala and Mexico City, reveal the first round of community land trust purchases, and end with a celebration. But halfway through Yvette's speech, the side doors burst open. 4 men in dark hoodies and masks stormed in, handguns drawn. The room erupted in screams. Everybody down, the leader barked, voice muffled but commanding. We're here for the artifacts. Hand them over, nobody gets hurt. Aisha's camera froze mid-shot. She recognized the voice instantly, the same distorted growl from the threatening calls. Landon stood slowly, hands raised. You don't want to do this. The leader swung his gun toward him. Pierce. Should have known you'd be here. Your old partners send regards. The black market buyers in Dubai are getting impatient. Those pieces belong to us. Chaos exploded, people diving under chairs, children crying, someone triggering the fire alarm. Yvette stayed on stage, defiant. You'll have to go through all of us. One gunman lunged toward the display table where replica artifacts sat for the presentation. Aisha saw her chance. She slipped behind the stage curtain, heart pounding, and grabbed the high-powered external flash unit from her camera bag, the one she used for night street photography, bright enough to blind. The leader advanced on Landon. Aisha stepped out, aimed the flash directly at the masked men's faces and fired. A blinding white burst, 1/8,000th of a second full power. The intruders staggered, cursing, temporarily flash blind. Pandemonium turned to opportunity. Landon tackled the nearest gunman. Yvette grabbed a folding chair and swung it like a lioness. Aisha fired the flash again and again, disorienting them further while shouting for everyone to run. The debtors recovered enough to bolt, dragging one of their own, firing warning shots into the ceiling as they fled toward the back parking lot. Aisha, Landon, and Yvette gave chase, adrenaline overriding fear. They spilled out into the afternoon glare, the gunman piling into a black van. Landon sprinted to his Range Rover, Yvette and Aisha diving in with him. The chase was on. Through Watt Streets onto the 105 freeway, then north toward the old Northridge quake zones, the same empty lot where they dug weeks ago. The debtors were heading for the buried cash, desperate to salvage something before disappearing. Sirens wailed behind them. Someone had called the cops fast. The van veered off into the abandoned industrial pocket, tires screeching. Landon followed, pushing the Rover hard. The gunman abandoned the vehicle and scattered into the quake-ruined landscape, cracked foundations, half-collapsed warehouses, rebar sticking out like bones. A foot chased through the debris. Aisha's camera was still around her neck. She used the flash again in the dim interiors, popping bursts that turned shadows into blinding daylight, giving Landon and her time to close distance. One debtor tripped over rebar. Landon pinned him. Another fired wildly. Yvette ducked behind a concrete pillar and hurled a chunk of rubble that clipped his shoulder. The last two surrendered when LAPD helicopters thundered overhead and squad cars screeched in, lights flashing. Cuffed and loaded into patrol cars, the leader finally yanked off his mask. Victor Harlan, Landon's former business partner from the 90s, the man who'd handled the insurance adjustments after the quake. "You thought you could rewrite history, Pierce?" Harlan spat. "Those artifacts were our retirement plan from day one." Evidence poured out in the following weeks. Texts, wire transfers, old ledgers tying Harlan and others to the fake death report, the artifact fencing, even sabotage of Landon's later projects when he tried to go legitimate. The conspiracy was bigger than any of them imagined. In the quiet aftermath, with the artifacts secured and Harlan's crew facing federal charges, the three of them sat in a quiet DNA testing clinic in Westwood. Just to confirm paternity officially, Landon had said. For legal reasons. And peace of mind. Results came back faster than expected. Aisha was undeniably his daughter. But the bigger shock was on Yvette's side. The technician handed over the secondary report, eyebrows raised. "Yvette, your sample shows a close familial match to someone in our database. A sibling match. Full brother." He submitted DNA anonymously 5 years ago through a victim advocacy program. Yvette went very still. "His name is Marcus Reeves," the tech continued. "He listed himself as a survivor of the 1994 Northridge quake. Presumed dead for decades, but very much alive. And he left contact instructions if family ever surfaced." Yvette's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus, her older brother, the radical architect who'd mentored Landon in UCLA days, who'd taught them both about ethical building, who'd been inside the collapsing museum with them that night. Everyone had thought he died in the initial quake. But he'd survived. Gone underground. Carried evidence of the firm's early frauds all these years, ledgers, recordings, proof of bribes and cover-ups that could bring down the remaining old guard at Pierce Developments. Aisha looked at her mother, then at Landon. "We're not just rebuilding houses," she said quietly. "We're rebuilding everything." The alliance had real teeth now, and the final reckoning was coming. 5 years later, the Getty Museum glowed like a white crown against the Los Angeles night. The grand gala filled the Traverton halls with music, laughter, and the clink of champagne flutes. Banners celebrated the Yvette Brooks Alliance's milestones. Over $40 million in artifacts repatriated to indigenous communities in Mexico and Guatemala, hundreds of affordable housing units built on formerly gentrified land, thousands of families protected from displacement. Aisha, now 37 and owner of a thriving photography gallery in Boyle Heights, stood near her latest exhibit, stunning black and white images of the Northridge quake ruins transformed into community gardens and playgrounds. Her work had been featured in National Geographic. Her prints hung in museums worldwide. Yvette, radiant and healthy at 58, moved through the crowd like the force she'd always been, directing the alliance with fierce compassion, mentoring young activists, her thrift shop long since evolved into a cultural hub. Landon, grayer but lighter somehow, wore a simple tuxedo and stayed close to them both. Pierce Developments had been restructured, half its portfolio converted to non-profit land trusts, the other half sold off to fund restitution. He'd stepped back from the spotlight, content to let Yvette and Aisha lead. On stage, dignitaries from Guatemala and Mexico City presented plaques. A mariachi band played. Children from the Alliance's scholarship program performed a traditional dance. Then the lights flickered. An older man in an ill-fitting suit pushed past security at the main entrance, face red with rage. Richard Harlan, Victor's older brother, Landon's original partner from the 90s, the architect of the insurance scams. Microphone feedback screeched as he grabbed a cordless mic from a side table. "This is all a lie," he shouted, voice echoing off the marble. "Pierce stole everything. Those artifacts are fakes, he's conning you all." Security moved in, but Landon raised a hand, stopping them. The room hushed. Richard laughed maniacally. The great Landon Pierce playing hero. Those cursed Mayan pieces everyone whispered about? Forgeries from day one. We planted them in the museum ourselves before the quake. Cheap replicas insured for millions. When the building collapsed, we collected the payout, blamed the chaos, and kickstarted the empire. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Aisha felt the floor tilt beneath her, even though the earth was still. Landon stepped forward, calm but pale. "He's telling the truth," Landon said into the silence, voice carrying without a mic. "The artifacts we recovered, the ones we thought were priceless, were indeed forgeries. Planted by Richard and Victor to launder insurance money after staging the collapse. The real Mayan pieces were sold off decades ago through private channels. Everything we repatriated was built on that lie." The room erupted, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Yvette's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from Landon. Aisha moved to his side, hand on his arm. Richard smirked, thinking he'd won. But Landon continued. "That's why, 6 months ago, I began cooperating with federal investigators. Every document, every offshore account, every recording from Marcus Reeves, your old partner who survived and kept evidence all these years, has been turned over." Richard's face drained. Uniformed federal agents appeared at the edges of the room, quiet, professional, planned. Richard tried to bolt but was cuffed before he reached the doors. Landon faced the crowd again. "I built an empire on fraud and abandonment," he said, voice steady. "Tonight I finish tearing it down. All remaining personal assets will go toward restitution, full reparations to displaced families, expanded housing trusts, and scholarships in Yvette and Aisha's names." He turned to them. "I can't undo the past, but I can make sure the future is built on something honest." The room was silent for a beat. Then applause started, slow at first, then thundering. Yvette stepped forward, taking the microphone. "This alliance was never about one man's redemption," she said. "It was about community, about truth. And tonight we choose truth." Aisha joined them, the three standing together on the steps. Later, when the gala emptied and the city lights sparkled below, they drove not to Malibu or Koreatown, but to a small taqueria in East LA, their weekly ritual for the past 3 years. They sat at a plastic table under string lights, eating al pastor tacos and drinking horchata, Marcus now a regular fixture beside them. Alive, graying, finally free from hiding. No bodyguards. No cameras. Just family. Landon raised his glass. "Jarritos, not champagne." "To the fault line," he said quietly. Yvette smiled, the star on her arm catching the light. "To the crack that let the light in." Aisha looked at them both, then at Marcus and finally at the city beyond, flawed, fractured but still standing. "One tattoo," she said, "changed everything." They clinked bottles. Outside, Los Angeles stretched into the night. Imperfect, restless, alive. And for the first time in 38 years, the ground beneath them felt solid. What will you rate this story from 0 to 10? And what part of the world are you watching from? Comment your country below. Let's build a global community rooted in kindness and second chances. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. Your support brings us closer to our 1K subscriber milestone and inspires us to keep creating more emotional stories of resilience, healing, and Black excellence. Thank you for being part of our journey. Your presence matters more than you know. Hope to see you again.